The Shining is considered one of the greatest films of all time, in a year when some of the greatest films have been released, 1980. I'm sure to get a tangent on the specifics of why The Shining is held in such regard. So, who decided this? Rotten Tomatoes? IMDb? Basically, me, based on a number of critics I've enjoyed 40-hour analyses from. There was a big circle of critics before forming the wave of Patrick H. Williams's Now You See It, Chris Stuckman, CinemaSins, etc. The Shining became the best film of all time, thanks to an early online critics such as Rob Ager and Darren Foley, reviewing it from a critics' consensus poll. Ager became synonymous with a bunch of 80s classics, especially Kubrick's films. Darren Foley became famous because of his trilogy of reviews regarding Paul Thomas Anderson's trilogy. Something coincidental is that they're both from the UK, but I digress. I'll be honest, I chose The Shining as a consensus pick for the critics of all time. A consensus pick of the best film of all time from the critics, like Ager and Foley. But it wasn't from me, not even of 1980. I'll get into why in a little bit. Basically, I didn't get The Shining, or Rob Ager's explanation. At least Rob Ager's explanation was like satisfying for me. Rob Ager's explanation wasn't satisfying for me. The Empire Strikes Back versus The Shining. The Empire Strikes Back and The Shining, two of the best films ever made, were released the same week. I'll get into that a little bit later. Both have themes of anti-imperialism. Both are the films that have to do with snow in very depressing moments in the film. In the press conference at WinterCon, the cast mentions how they actually use the snow from The Shining, which you can see on my website. Both are films that have to do with a scary father. Ager loves The Empire Strikes Back, so does Darren Foley. The contemporary critical audience may have picked Empire Strikes Back, although that Return of the Jedi was great. It was a great ending for the original Star Wars trilogy. In any case, no Star Wars film had beaten Star Wars or Episode 4 A New Hope, as it's called now, unadjusted for inflation, as I've gone with the wind. Maybe I got that wrong. In any case, Raging Bull versus The Shining. No one ever talks about Raging Bull. It's a damn shame because it's damn good. Better than Rocky, more crass, albeit sort of gets overshadowed by Taxi Driver. Scorsese also won the Palme d'Or for this film. How'd you forget De Niro and Pesci? The Elephant Man versus The Shining. I like David Lynch. I like David Lynch, but I feel like there's some lynching things going on, but it's mainly just the costume and John Hurt's performance. That film, in my opinion. Or maybe I haven't talked enough about that film. I don't really get Kagemusha. Kurosawa is awesome though. My favorite is The Shining. It's not a film that pretty much anyone ever mentions compared to The Shining in 1980. It was my favorite. And it's done by a famous director, Ingmar Bergman. I believe the TV film from the life of the marionettes. Critics like a lot of dark, hard to grasp, to understand, to enjoy, basically, Bergman films. Not so much me. I like the contemporary, easy to understand ones. But that being said, this one feels a little bit American enough, and so it works. Probably because there's not as many takes and intensity because it was a TV film, from what I hear from the Wikipedia. We'll double check. A television film, according to the Wikipedia, German. Here's related to the scenes from a marriage. To scenes from a marriage. but it doesn't feel like it with the original cast. He wasn't tax exile. Despite that, it's a great film. Camera work is great. The media res works really well. In the film of Sunset Boulevard, Norrisville, do it. Robert Atzum plays the depressed husband very well. Has a more American look than the actor in Scenes from a Marriage. You feel signs of his vulnerability, even when he does these dark acts. Even in the beginning of the film, just because he's able to carry the performance, his likability for the film, his vulnerability, his helplessness. It's kind of simplicity I liked in Robert Bresson's A Man Escaped. Someone to understand prior to Bresson doing the jangling everything. Every scene in both A Man Escaped and The Life of the Marionettes so simple, so shot specifically and perfectly. Is that actually better than The Shining, though? I felt it did at the time. Kubrick's shots are very specific too, but I'm not the biggest fan of The Shining's camera work, at least in this film. Although, the point is, only pick reviews and best lists from either being picky or being very open to every film you watch. And if you follow reviews, pick reviewers you follow. That's just an aggregate score of the people you've never heard of off a website, even if it has some billion reviewers on it. But in any case, despite its acclaim, it used to be one of the nominees for the Golden Raspberry when it came out. Even so was the Heaven's Gate that same year. Well, it was the film that pretty much ruined the studio system. Product placement. I interviewed John Savage from The Deer Hunter prior to this review. I'd hope you guys check it out. I didn't research specific reasons about The Shining and not being by everything, but after my first viewing of the film, the ghost story of Mickey Dewey was very frustrating. That, of course, means it's very good, and maybe the simple audience members shouldn't complain about it. I guess I might as well summarize the plot of the film here since I just mentioned a key part of the film. The Shining has had a lot of references in recent years. Ready Player One, The It and Doctor Sleep, Stephen King films, John Wick 2 with the bar scene, the Michael Sheen film with Jennifer Lawrence where he's a robot bartender. I don't believe Rob Agger likes these films. He claims he likes Doctor Sleep, but not for the Shining parts, and I'll explain why. Right now, Doctor Sleep is apolitical. It has nothing to do with America, Halloran, or Native Americans. And here's a huge chunk of July 4th, 2020, and its interpretation of The Shining. Since Watchmen on HBO, Season 1, the show that's complimentary on Hulu and was free on HBO.com. Dr. Manhattan's perception of time has gotten to me, and everything's happening right now. Let me explain. Acker discussed a lot of the anti-Americanisms of The Shining, the film by Stanley Kubrick. And with 2020 happening, I've all of a sudden had a lot of analyses to do. The 70s were an interesting time. 10 years ago, it's references in The Shining 1970. The film came out in 1980, 12 years after Nixon became president. Martin Luther King Jr. got shot. Robert Kennedy got shot. Both died, and we left Vietnam. The next Kubrick film will be about the Vietnam War. I digress. I didn't get into the film until my recent analysis. Let's go back and talk about the plot of The Shining for a little bit. So Jack Torrance brings his family to the Overlook Hotel, where he's paid the house sit. He meets Stanley Ullman, who teaches Jack Torrance the horrifying story of the last caretaker. He gets to write us some sort of written creative work Jack's very mean to his wife, who takes a lot of abuse from Jack. His son Danny, who I can't say it as it'll spoil most other films or books, but it's sort of like Life is Strange 2, which I just beat. I didn't really think about before making this analysis, but yeah, this is like telekinetic power called The Shining. He talks to the Overlook Hotel worker named Mr. Halloran, which is important for when later Jack Torrance loses his mind and attempts to murder his family. Danny contacts Halloran in an attempt to save him and his mom from Jack. And what happens? Let's get into it a little bit. 1968, Fiorello LaGuardia was the mayor of New York City. He banned pinball machines as it was associated with organized crime. Robert F. Kennedy was against organized crime. And you know about the Irishman and Jimmy Hoffa, etc. A lot of 1968 stuff going on. The moon landing was in 1968, I believe, yeah. 2001: A Space Odyssey. The spaceship and Kubrick's themes. Speaking of which, there's a lot of theories on Kubrick faking the moon landing. The spaceship and Kubrick's themes isn't like they have actual spaceships, unfortunately. I don't know if it's fake or not. I don't believe it is. 90% sure. But what's significant is the space race. And there's a lot of as I mentioned, a lot of anti-Americanisms in the film. Start in the Overlook Hotel, which has all these like Native American brownish colors on it. Could be frontierish too. The workers wear brown. Well, Stanley Ullman wears red and blue. Same with Stanley Ullman. I'll tell you about the ending. The Tulsa Massacre happened that year, and Americans celebrated both Father's Day, like with Jack Torrance. They mentioned between May and October when he would stay there in the Overlook Hotel. Tulsa Massacre happened that year. Very horrible events happening. It was in 1921. It was 1961, but there's some stuff there. It's not a ghost story, it's a tale about American independence. They talk about this Indian burial ground. It's not just a story in the film or the fact that they're wearing like Native American outfits there. It's about how America is the American burial ground. Jack Torrance being told that he's the owner of the Overlook Hotel is significant in the film, because he's not the owner of the hotel. Grady isn't, Ullman isn't, he doesn't own it, America doesn't own it, the Indians own it. It's a lie the ghost tells Jack, just like Americans tell the U.S. The American government tells the U.S. they own America. George Washington chopped down a cherry tree. Jack goes to the Overlook Hotel, just like Columbus goes in the middle of nowhere to go to America. Will justify their reasons for going into the middle of a forest to live somewhere else and claim the land as theirs.
Hello. Great party, isn't it?